In the last moments of his life, alone on Har Nevo, Moshe was terrified. God, too, was struggling. Full of compassion, but resolute that Moshe must die, God prepared him a golden bed. Moshe laid down on it, and he began to have a vision. He saw the heavenly temple glowing with jewels and rich colors, and he realized that this was what awaited him after his death. Moshe began to relax, and at once the angel of death appeared. Moshe was again seized with terror. But as he looked closer, he realized the figure was not dark at all, but full of light and surrounded by color. And as the figure approached, Moshe perceived that it was the face of his beloved God. Moshe calmed, and God approached tenderly, claiming his soul with a gentle kiss. Down on earth, Joshua was overcome with grief. He screamed and wailed for many days, until finally God said to him, "Enough! Don't you know that I too am grieving? I've been in mourning for Moshe since the day he died. Velo kam navi od b'Yisrael k'Moshe, asher yeda'o Adonai panim el panim." Never again did there arise a prophet like Moshe, whom God knew face to face. God reached out to many people, but none became a partner like Moshe. Despite the suffering, through all the rebellions, Moshe held on. When the mountain shook and the people kept their distance, Moshe walked into the mist. When God was filled with rage and wanted to wipe out the Israelites, Moshe was the voice of reason. And when God's presence filled the Mishkan, Moshe's face was lit up by the encounter. And that is what makes a truly loving relationship. In relationships of all kinds, religious, social, business, romantic, love comes when we see the other fully, as if we're looking through a clear pane of glass. We see Moshe and God's relationship blossom in the first words of Parshat Va'era. Our Parsha picks up in the middle of a conversation that is not going well. At the end of last week's Parsha, Moshe accused God of bringing harm to the Israelites and sending him on a fool's mission. Moshe, in his complaint, not only walks into the breach, but crosses all the way to the other side. He calls God out on the Israelites' suffering. "O Lord, why did you bring harm to this people?" Moshe begs. "Where is your compassion? And why do you need my help to redeem your people? Is your might not sufficient to fulfill your own covenant? Ever since I came to speak to Pharaoh in your name, he has dealt worse with this people. V'hatzel lo hitzalta et amecha. You still have not delivered your people." Rather than abandon Moshe or shut down his critique, God redoubles the effort to build a relationship. Vayedaber Elohim el Moshe vayomer elav, Ani Adonai. Okay, Moshe. Deep breath. It's me, God. My name is Yud He Vav He. Va'ira l'Avraham el Yitzchak ve'el Yaakov be'el Shaddai. Ushmi Adonai lo nodati lahem. I am the same divine being who appeared to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the guise of El Shaddai. But the name I shared with you, Yud He Vav He, I did not make known to them. See, Moshe, you are special to me. We share a kind of intimacy I've never had with anyone else, not even my chosen ones, your forefathers. V'gam hakimoti et briti itam, latet lehem et eretz Canaan. I established my covenant with them, and I will uphold it. I will give them the land of Canaan. You can trust me. I keep my promises, even if it might take me a while. Now, if I imagine myself in Moshe's shoes during this scene, I feel angry. Why would I want to get closer to this God who said my people will go free, and instead they suffer more? But that is why I am not Moshe. Whereas I can only feel anger at the injustice, Moshe is a man with an unparalleled capacity for love. He's able to feel anger and continue to listen. Though God seems to have abandoned the Israelites in callousness, Moshe knows there's more to God than meets the eye. The Zohar claims that God is like a spectrum of colors, some of which are revealed and some of which are not revealed. The only human to know the entire spectrum was Moshe. The Holy Blessed One began to reveal some of these colors to the forebearers, but they did not know them by name. They did not know all of the shades of the Divine One. The only person to know God with this utmost intimacy was Moshe. This, the Zohar explains, is what God meant by Ushmi Adonai lo nodati lahem. When Moshe saw a bush that was burning, he did not flinch or look away. In fact, he looked more closely. And that gesture of openness gave God the space to be vulnerable. Finally, all of divine nature could be revealed: covenants and separation, salvation and suffering, loyalty and betrayal. The God who was in relationship with the forebearers did not make all of this known to them. But in relationship with Moshe, the Divine One was finally able to be totally open. When we first start a relationship, we want to be seen in a positive light. But as things deepen and we become more serious, we start to let the other person see some of our flaws. We stop trying to create our ideal self through makeup and masks. Instead, we drop our guard and we test out sharing some of our insecurities, our weaknesses, our struggles. We want to know that the other can truly love us for who we are, not some gussied-up version. God's admission to Moshe feels like a gesture towards intimacy in a real and realistic way. The Midrash in Shmot Rabbah teaches that God reached out to Moshe like one who is struggling with a heavy burden. "Moshe, Moshe," God called, "help me. I'm so alone, and I will do anything for you and your people if you will only get close and know me." Of course, Abraham never knew this side of God. They were just in the beginning stages of a relationship. God needed Abraham's trust and attention. Perhaps even the master of the universe was afraid of being inadequate. So all this time, from the beginning of creation to that initial covenant with Abraham, to the descent of the children of Israel to the narrow place, God had no partner. But finally, in Moshe, God took the leap. Peering through the brambles of a burning bush, God saw a human being who stood up for what was right, whose immediate response to suffering was action. Unlike Abraham, who pleaded with God to save Sodom and Amorah, but then went unquestioningly to sacrifice his own son, Moshe's compassion and curiosity were boundless. This, finally, was a partner who could be in relationship with the divine completely, who could continue to have faith when he heard his people's cries of pain, and therefore could be the one to lead God's people to redemption. A truly loving relationship with God or any living being must celebrate the beautiful and endure through the ugly. We see this in a verse that many of us know well. Isaiah calls God Yotzer Or Uvorei Choshech, Oseh Shalom Uvorei Ra. God is the creator of light and darkness, the maker of peace, and creator of evil. But this glimpse of God's nature is too hard for most people to face directly. The Buddhists call it the first noble truth: know that suffering exists. We are part of the way towards enlightenment already, according to the Buddhists, if we can simply allow ourselves to sit with the painful truth that suffering is inevitable. But we're not good with this painful knowledge. The rabbis whitewashed Isaiah's description of God for everyday use in our liturgy, prompting us instead to say, Oseh Shalom Uvorei Hakol. We know what the euphemism is hiding, but we don't want to start our day by acknowledging it so openly. To protect ourselves, we settle for a half-truth. It's like watching a scary movie. When we feel afraid, sometimes we just need to cover our eyes and trust that a loved one will tell us when it's safe to look again. But if we get in the habit of covering our eyes every time we feel afraid, we miss half the movie. Perhaps this is why Moshe merited to know a different aspect of God than was revealed to any person. He didn't try to cover his eyes. The Avot saw previews of this movie and walked away scarred. Abraham almost killed his beloved son. Isaac never spoke again after this brush with death, and Jacob lived out his years bitter over his sufferings. Even when the words of truth are handed directly to us through the prophets, we can only allude to all of God's attributes through euphemism. The Talmud in Yevamot teaches that the prophets saw their prophecies through an opaque looking glass. They had the kind of visual experience of God that the Zohar describes, but their prophecies were given as partial visions, not as a direct perception of God. But Moshe Rabbeinu saw God's will through a totally transparent glass. Moshe experienced what no one else could. He had a direct and honest relationship with God. Somewhere along the way, from Moshe to Isaiah to us, we lost our nerve, and the glass all but disappeared. We could never stop the suffering, and we never quite stopped talking about it. But we could stop mentioning it explicitly, and we could conveniently avoid the awkward question of where it comes from. But in our avoidance, we've lost intimacy with God and with each other. We can live a more whole and holy life if we too do not shy away from the hard emotions and experiences. Our instinct is to lean into the good. It's common for Jews to bless one another by saying, "May you know only simchas." The sentiment is beautiful. Out of my love and compassion for you, I hope that you will not suffer. But such a life would only be a half-life. If we knew only simchas, we would miss half the spectrum of human emotions. We would miss the wonder of each daily miracle of survival and connection. Of course, this kind of honesty is a risk. We might be rejected, and what hurts more than opening up only to find that no one can love you for who you truly are? But as Albus Dumbledore said, "Do not pity the dead, Harry. Pity the living, and above all, those who live without love." Inevitably, when we love, we will get hurt. But the alternative is worse. A life well lived is not one without suffering, but one in which we get to experience all of God's names. We do not just want the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That God made covenants that the forebears never merited to see fulfilled. Sure, they never had to hear the cries of their descendants crushed in slavery, but they also never got to witness the redemption or see God in full color. Of course, we do not want to pray that we will suffer just so that we can be close to God. But perhaps we can develop the courage to pray for openness, to surrender our attachment to a particular outcome. When we pray to be someone who is ready to come face to face with God, we're praying for the capacity to love. We open ourselves to a more full experience of God through a full experience of life. We strive to live a life full of love, with all of its vulnerability and pain and unspeakable joy, so that we can see as many of the different colors of divinity as possible. May we all be blessed to know God in all of God's names, for pain and joy and fear and safety, that we get to experience all the holiness that this world has to offer. Please join me in Kaddish D'Rabbanan as we praise the God who allows us to teach and learn Torah. Yitgadal v'yitkadash Shmei Rabbah, v'yalma divrach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael, ba'agalau v'izman kariv v'imru, Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah v'rach v'lam umeo maya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal Shmei Kudsha brichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tush bechata v'nechemata, da'amiran be'alma v'imru, Amen. ve'al Yisrael, ve'al Rabbanan, ve'al Talmidei ve'al kol Talmidei hon, ve'al kol man de'askin be'oraita, diva atra adein uvidi ve'chol atar ve'atar, yehe lehon ulechon shlama rabba, china v'chista v'rachamin, v'chayin arichin umzona revicha, uforkana min kadam v'hondi v'shmaya v'imru, amen. Yehe shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chaim tovim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru, amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru,